Hello, everyone, and welcome back to MULCH. I can't lie, I am so excited today to have our first guest ever. Usually I start a podcast by talking about the weather, so I'm going to be super quick. It is clear, it is dry, it's almost warm, there are no clouds in the sky, it's not raining in Yorkshire. Absolute bonus, very happy. But I'm going to move on because I'm super excited to welcome this morning Sophie Cliff, who is an author and positivity coach based in Yorkshire. Welcome, Sophie.
Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to talking, and I am also enjoying the clear sky. It makes such a difference.
It really does. It really does. It makes me smile, and it makes approaching the work that we do outdoors so much easier. I would love it, Sophie, if you would start by telling us who you are, where you come from, and what you do.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. My name is Sophie Cliff. I'm also known as the Joyful Coach, and I'm a coach, a positive psychology practitioner, and an author. And all of my work is around using tools from positive psychology and from the field of coaching to help people find more joy in their lives and in their work. And that sometimes looks like working one-to-one with clients. It sometimes looks like group programs. It sometimes looks like writing books and, getting the message out there that way. But I am a big believer, and I trust the research from positive psychology that tells us when we put joy at the heart of things, everything gets better, whether that is our output, our productivity, our relationships, our health, our well-being. It is really a catalyst for all of the things that we care about. And what I care about is taking all of the research out of the fusty old journal articles that no one ever reads, or that sit behind paywalls or in, libraries that only academics get to visit, taking it out of there and putting it into people's hands so that they can use it and put it into practice. And in terms of where I'm just up the road from you here in Leeds. And yeah, very much always talking about the weather because it is so changeable here, isn't it?
It is incredibly changeable here. Yes, you're right. And the weird thing is that you are just up the road in Farsley, so not too far from me at all. But I actually heard about you first via our graphic designer, Liz Mosley, who's based in Cardiff. So that's how I heard about you first. That's where I heard about your first book first. And that's how I came to look you up and find out more about you. Thank you for that introduction. I think positive psychology in and of itself isn't something that many people have heard of, and I really hope that people go and seek out your first book, which is not the reason that you're here. But tell people for a minute, what is your first book called, and could you summarise it in a couple of sentences or chapters?
The first book is called Choose Joy, and it really is a sort of manual on how to do just that. So like you said, lots of people won't have heard of positive psychology. The best way, I think, to summarise it is that psychology as a whole looks at how we can take people from a -10 to a 0. So it looks at how we can fix something that might be feeling a little bit broken, how we can help to heal past wounds or past traumas and get people to a neutral place. Positive psychology looks at how we can take people from a 0 to a +10. So we study people who are thriving, who are successful, who have great well-being, and we look to spot if there are any sort of things that we can learn from how those people are living, and that forms the basis of positive psychology. And in that first book, I really sort of share, I suppose, my own journey from going from, definitely being in that latter half, the 0 to the -10, and how I've sort of changed things and moved into that 0 to that +10 category, and also sharing practical ways that other people can do that. So drawing on some of the big tools of positive psychology, like finding your values and your strengths, overcoming some of the mindset blocks, really thinking about living authentically. I am a big believer that joyful living isn't about being happy all the time. It's not toxic positivity. It's not fluffy. It's not woo-woo. It is doing more of the stuff that matters to us, and it's focusing on the good stuff as much as we do the bad stuff. As everyone listening to this will know, we are all really skilled at focusing on the bad stuff, about worrying what could go wrong, or lingering on negative feedback, or rehashing challenging times in our lives. We are really, I've never met anyone who is brilliant at focusing on the good stuff, because, that is how we've evolved. Biologically, we have this, we have this inherent negativity bias. But if we can start to focus on the good stuff more, and we can do that in a real practical and realistic way that's, not about changing our lives completely. It's just about giving the good stuff a bit more attention. We can really start to find more of that joy and more of the benefits that come from that, like I shared earlier.
Yeah. I have to say that anyone who listens to the podcast regularly will know that I've read your book by that summary. And the reason that they'll know that is because I often refer to joy as being super important and shoulds being things that really suck the joy out of my life. And make me into a rebellious child and teenager. I have a rebellious teenager and preteen in the house. It is no fun. Should is just not the word that brings any fun. But on top of that, anybody who's doing the Flower Farming Business School will also start to see the links between how we design our business and our business plan based around those kind of dreams and intentions and those positive things, and our Friday mornings in particular around our successes and our wins and the things that we've achieved rather than things on the to-do list that we haven't got to. So the influence that you've had over how I phrase that and how I look at my work actually is really quite phenomenal. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I would like to tell you a little bit about our main listeners. So as you know, I'm a flower farmer in Yorkshire, and most of our audience are flower farmers, flower growers in the UK and some further afield. We also have a smattering of florists who listen to our work. And so the majority of people who listen to the podcast are women, not all, but the stats say about 98%. The majority of women who listen to our podcast have more than one role and are in that kind of halfway house, which is, I guess, just before we met the first time for us, where they are doing a main job that pays the bills. They are growing their business that will hopefully pay the bills in the future. And they are also carers, caregivers in more than one way for either younger children, older children, elderly parents. And so life is complex and it's incredibly busy. Tell me a little bit about your new book. Yes. Tell me a little bit about what it's called and why you wrote it and how. And then I'm going to start with a difficult question.
Yeah. So what you've just described there in terms of your listeners and your audience very much rings true of my life and also the people that I work with, in that life is chaos, and it's beautiful chaos a lot of the time, but it is still a lot of juggling. There's a lot of different demands. There is never enough time and never enough energy, and time and energy are two different things, which we might end up talking a little bit about today. But so where my new book came from, which is called The Hustle Cure, is just over 2.5 years ago, I was pregnant with my daughter, and I was running my business solo by myself, and everyone kept telling me, once your daughter arrives, you're not going to have any time, scrap all that time that you've got, all that freedom and that flexibility. And I didn't feel like I had a whole load of time anyway, because I was running a business and, still being in my community, and, you have all of these other commitments. But I thought, oh crap, like I really need to get better at time management. And I went and bought lots of productivity and time management books, and quickly realised that, I realised a few things. One is that the vast majority of them were written by and for essentially men. So when I looked in the Amazon top 50 time management chart, there was only one book written by a woman, and it was about batch cooking. So first of all, just the advice and the sort of critical thinking was coming from one type of person. Yeah. And it was also often not just men, but men who had very senior roles in organisations and perhaps had, a lot of privilege, had an assistant and maybe had a wife or a nanny at home helping with lots of the domestic load. And I was kind of reading these books thinking, okay, be consistent, that's fine. But how can you be consistent when our hormones fluctuate every day and I don't feel the same and have the same amount of energy every day? Or how can I get up at 5 a.m. if, I have a new baby and I'm going to be up all night with the baby? Or it just didn't feel rooted in that reality that you've just described, which is that most of us have multiple competing priorities and not enough time. I was like, there's no amount of calendar blocking or task batching that is going to help with this. So that was the first thing that I realised. And the second thing that I realised was that a lot of these books were centered in doing for doing's sake. So how can we just become more productive? And it wasn't about how can we become more productive so that we can do more of the things we really want to do, or how can we more effectively achieve the things that really mean something to us, or how can we build a life that allows us to do those things that, like we've just said, bring us joy. And so I kind of approached my publishers with a bit of a bee in my bonnet, that's sort of saying, why is no one letting women write about this stuff? Why is no one rooting this in reality? And why are we just all trying to be busier for the sake of being busier? You know, how can we really put, our vision, our values, our joy, all of those things we've just talked about at the center of this? And that was really the jumping off point. So this book is, the subtitle is a new approach to burnout and productivity for women. And that's really what it looks like. It's, trying to be more grounded in the realities that we've got, where we do have multiple caregiving responsibilities and we do carry more of the mental load, and societal expectations are different, and we have biological differences and hormonal differences. And how can we acknowledge and accept all of that, but also how can we see that as our strength rather than as something we have to fix and work around? And I think that was the big thing I took away from writing this book, was that for so long I have been taught that I just need to overcome those things and I just have to work around it and find a way and push through it. And what I found from the research and the writing of this book is that actually so many of these things are our super strengths. They are where we can really add value. They are where we can really add joy if we lean into them and embrace them. But no one has ever taught us that. We've just always taught that we need to fit in the mould and fit in the path that has been laid out for us.
So when I heard you say something along those lines within your book, so for our readers, I've listened to the book, I haven't read the book, and that's because I struggle with reading lots, but I can listen really well. But when I heard you say something like that, it really clicked with me, and it really clicked with me because I thought, well, my background's in medicine, and I've never thought about my life in this way. How many other women are thinking, interesting, this part of my life will be easier than this part of my life. These days in my month are going to be easier than those days in my month, and so on and so forth. Okay, so productivity for women specifically, is it just another stick that we should be beating ourselves with? Because it feels like all the productivity books out there are about getting more done, as you've described it. It feels like it's something that we should be doing. And as women who are wanting to grow businesses, as women who are wanting to do work that brings us joy, that step to get there seems almost impossible unless we become more productivity. How would you help us to think about that kind of productivity element before we dive into kind of productivity types and rest, which is where I really wanted to get to today?
Yeah, there's a whole chapter in the book which is why are we so obsessed with productivity anyway? And that really, I think, speaks to what you've just said there, is I think we are sold and, we are in this hyper-capitalistic, super patriarchal, getting more so at the time of us recording this world, where we are told over and over again that our happiness or our joy lies on the other side of being more productive. So if we could just have a perfect morning routine, then we'll be able to get more work done, and then we'll get to that joyful place that we're striving towards. Or if we can just tick more things off the to-do list today, then tomorrow will be easier. But we all know, we've all had super productive weeks where you tick everything off. Doesn't mean that the next week is any easier, because the stuff sort of starts to refill and reload. And I kept thinking when I was writing this about some advice that a friend gave me when I became a mum. She said, don't worry about the laundry, because you're never going to get to the bottom of the laundry basket as a mum. It's not going to happen. You can do 3 loads of washing a day and there will still be more washing in the basket by the end of the day, because it's one of those cycles that is never done. And I think there's so much in our life that sort of speaks to that, whether it's clearing the email inbox. You think, great, I've sat down, I've replied to all the emails, I've got everything done. It's not done. It just recycles itself almost, it refills itself. And I think particularly as business owners, it's something we have to be very conscious of, because the list is never done. You could complete all of the things on your to-do list, and then your brain will say, oh, but have you updated your website? Or is it time for a rebrand? Or do we need to start growing a new type of foliage? Or, do we need to get a little bit more space? And these things, there is always limitless potential. So really what I believe is that true productivity is not about the volume of stuff we get done. It's about the stuff that makes an impact and the stuff that matters. And a big chunk of this book is around helping people to distill that and figure that out, because it's really hard to get to the heart of it. There's an awful lot of noise, and there's an awful lot of noise as business owners. You log on to Instagram or you listen to a podcast and you suddenly get 15 new ideas of like, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. And, the work is never done. You can be feeling super successful and like you're having a great time, and you just see one post from someone else and think, oh, maybe I should be, doing that next thing. And so it's about trying to give people the tools to switch off from some of that noise and really come back to, what does that success look like for you? What's your definition of it? And how can we stay rooted in that? And how can we also make sure that that definition of success is not just be the biggest, be the best, be the loudest, but actually be rooted in what brings you joy? So for me, a big part of my definition of success is being able to work around my family and being able to have quality time with my daughter while she's young. That means that I'm not as, on paper successful. My revenue isn't as big. The things that I'm able to achieve in my time don't match other people who are at a similar stage of business or in a similar industry to me. But that's okay, because I know right now, if I can spend that time with my daughter and I can still pay our mortgage and, keep doing work that I really love, that is all I've ever dreamed about. But it's really easy to forget that if we don't really stay rooted to our own definition. So I think when it comes to productivity, how I would encourage people to think about it a little bit differently is not just how can I get more done, but what does it really matter that I get done, and how can I give more focus and time and energy to that?
Amazing. Thank you. Okay, so when I listened to the book, thinking about that productivity theme and thinking about what you said earlier about really wanting to harness our super strengths, one of the things that struck me was that you divided people, broadly speaking, into productivity groups. Now, I have to say, I had a little bit of a panic because I feel like I fit into every single one of your groups. Which, I don't know what that says about my brain or my personality, but I certainly think on different parts of every day I kind of fall into each of those categories. It would be really helpful before we talk about rest to summarise those for the listeners so that they understand how they can take away some learning from the podcast before they get your book.
Yeah. Brilliant. So yes, we developed 4 productivity archetypes, and don't worry, you aren't the only person who said, I feel like I could be all of them, and we might be different ones in different areas of life, or we might be a blend. Obviously, there's so much nuance. We're not all going to fit in one of 4 buckets, but they were designed to almost help the reader take the advice that was most useful for them. Again, something I was really keen to do with this book is not pretend that there is a one-size-fits-all approach to productivity. So the 4 productivity archetypes are the doer. So this is someone who likes to be busy, has always got a to-do list, gets a real dopamine rush from ticking something off the to-do list. You sort of say to them, shall we get a coffee date in? And they give you a date 3 months in the future because their calendar is already jam-packed. They are always busy and they thrive off that. There is the perfectionist, so also quite busy, but what they are really motivated and driven by is doing things perfectly. They want to know what the expectations are. They want to do everything perfectly. They can really beat themselves up if they feel like they are deviating from that expectation. And their biggest watch out, the doer's biggest watch out is that sometimes they're so busy doing, they're not really thinking about what they're doing or why they're doing it, or if it's the most impactful thing. For a perfectionist, their biggest watch out is that they are often holding themselves to other people's standards and expectations. So they're not really thinking about what, do they want, what will be, best for them. They're thinking about how can I be a perfect daughter or a perfect wife or a perfect business owner or a perfect flower farmer or whatever that might be. And they're almost looking externally to find those measures of success. There is the dreamer, who is very, very good at knowing where they want to get to. So whereas a doer and a perfectionist are not, they're not really thinking about why or what their version of success is. They're just filling their sort of, their diaries with what other people's expectations are or keeping busy. A dreamer is really great at knowing why they're doing what they're doing, where they want to get to. They can really visualize what success looks like, but they perhaps struggle to map out and take the action to get there. So their frustration is that things often stay stuck in that pipe dream sense of, one day I'll do this, one day I'll have this business, or, we often hear people say, oh, when I retire, I'll open a shop, or when I retire, I'll start my flower farm. Yeah, it's kind of like everything feels like a dream rather than a possibility. And then we have the procrastinator, who really knows where they want to get to. They know what they need to do. They can map it out in a more effective way than perhaps the dreamer can. But what they struggle with is the action. And that is often because either they feel a little bit cynical that their action will pay off in the long run. So they kind of think it's better to not bother. It's better to just sort of preserve my energy. Yeah. Or they perhaps struggle with some of that, like I've seen with some of my clients. It's less about cynicism and it's more of a self-worth thing of, can I give that time to myself? Can I pour that energy into this dream if, other people need things from me? So they end up procrastinating and saying yes to lots of other things. They take on other duties or other challenges in order to avoid having to look at their own dream and their own version of success. So like you said, we probably all have a bit of a blend of each. And I think we definitely have, I've seen in my own life and with clients, we might have different styles in different areas of life. So I'm very much a doer at work. I constantly have to remind myself to take a step back and think, why is this important to me? Where am I trying to get to? Instead of just saying yes and filling up the to-do list. And I'm very much a procrastinator in my personal life. So it takes me a long time to get round to doing any of the things that I say I'm going to do. And it often, I'll leave it till the last minute and I'll be up against a deadline rather than being able to plan things out. So we might have different sort of styles. Yeah. And again, this isn't prescriptive. It's not a diagnosis. It's just reminding people that we're all motivated in different ways and we all bring different things to our relationship with productivity.
So just going back to the procrastinator, when I listened to the book, that's actually not the one that jumped out at me, and it's not the purpose of our podcast. However, the procrastinator, when you describe it in this way, really kind of sings to me of flower farmers and florists who are just starting out in their business and who have many other responsibilities, like women, and we've already discussed this. But also there's an element of fear of the risk or jumping in and diving in and the what if. Well, if I do this, what if it fails? If I do this, what will people say? If I do this, will it work? Actually, it's better to hold back and to be certain that it hasn't happened. Or if I only half market something, then I know that it hasn't succeeded because I haven't actually given it my all. Is that part of it, or is that just my own personal hang up? I don't know.
No, I would absolutely say that's part of it. And I think the other thing that we do is look for those other excuses. So I know a couple of my clients who are procrastinators, they will volunteer for the PTA and agree to run their children around everywhere, or agree to go to their friends' drinks even though they know that they've got other things to be doing. And that kind of validates not having to do the thing. So it would be selfish of me to take this time to work on my business when my friend needs me or my kids need me. Or so sometimes boundary setting can be a real problem for those procrastinators as well. And there is a section in the book about how we can set those boundaries. But you're right, all of those, they are sort of behaviors, but the problem or the sort of crux of it at the core is it feels scary and it feels overwhelming, and we're scared of failure, and we're also sometimes really scared of success, of what if this does go really well and my life changes and I have to think about how I'm going to manage my taxes as a business owner, or how I'm going to manage my schedule. Or so sometimes we get so wrapped up in, well, even if it does all go well, it might still be really hard, that we then get frozen, and it's almost like our nervous system is activated and we get in that fight, flight, freeze response.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And I really hope that the way you're describing it is something that our listeners can resonate with, because it's a sense that I get a lot about people that I work with. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychologist, and it's really fantastic to have you here. Okay, so this week in my curriculum for the Flower Farming Business School, it is Self-Care Week. It is Flower Farmer Self-Care Week. So the reason that I wanted to get you on is to talk in part about rest. So we're talking behind the scenes about skin care, lifting and handling, backs, joints, eyes, clothing, personal protective equipment, and all of those things. I've already talked about rest. I've already talked about sleep. I've already talked about holidays. But there's more to it than that. And again, it was almost a revolutionary moment when you said, it's not just about getting some sleep, Rebecca. You didn't say Rebecca, because the book is not to me, but evidently I thought, Sophie, I think you've got a point there. It's not just about sleep. So can you tell us about rest and a really lovely way that you've divided it up so that it makes it a bit more accessible?
Yeah. So I was very much like you and had spent so much time focusing on getting enough rest, getting enough sleep, getting enough downtime, and kept thinking, why do I still feel knackered? Or why don't I have the sort of energy that I want to have? So I might have felt physically, fine, but I wasn't creatively engaged, or I wasn't feeling like I could tackle some of the things on my to-do list. And it was really something I wanted to tackle in the book, because rest is so important to that relationship with productivity. Like I said, we so often focus on time management. I think when it comes to productivity, we should be focusing on energy management, because we all know you can have 2 hours of time, and if you're procrastinating on something, or you don't want to do something, or you haven't got the energy, it can take you the full 2 hours. Whereas if you're feeling energized and creative, what you can get done in 2 hours can be, completely different. So it's not just about how much time we have available to us. It's about that sort of energetic meeting point as well. So what I found with the research is that we essentially need lots of different things in order to feel recharged and in order to feel at our sort of optimal energetic place. And what I tried to do was synthesize all of that research and create something that was a little bit more straightforward. And I created what was called the rest and recharge model. And the idea is that this model has got 2 axes. So running along the horizontal line, you have stimulation, and then running along the vertical line, you have exertion. So stimulation is very much that sense of mental energy, how much mental energy we're giving something, and exertion is physical energy. So then mapped out the sort of 4 types of activities we need to feel recharged around that map. And in the bottom left quadrant, we have physical recharge. So this is what you would sort of expect and think about as rest. This is your sort of sleep. It's your it's it's having a nap. It's maybe going for a massage. It is doing a lot of the stuff that you've been saying around, joints and resting and allowing yourself to recover from manual work. And that is when you've got both low exertion and low stimulation. The watch out here is we often think we're resting because we are lay on the couch watching Netflix, but there is still some stimulation there depending on what it is that we're consuming. So we might be, scrolling TikTok or Instagram, and actually our brain is very activated, so we're not getting high quality physical rest. We then have mental recharge, where it's still low exertion but higher stimulation. So this might be things like journaling, meditation, meeting a friend, having a phone call with a friend. So you are still getting that sense of physical rest, but you are sort of working with your brain in a way, and we might be reflecting, and we might be learning things, and we might be processing things. And that's the whole point of this area, is that a big part of feeling rested is to be able to process what is happening around us. If we can't process life and we can't switch off from life, then we're never going to have that high quality sleep or that high quality rest. So, your listeners will know they'll have had those days where you go to bed physically exhausted because you've been out on the farm all day, but your brain is still wearing because it hasn't had chance to sort of switch off from anything else. So those tasks in that quadrant are really about how do we process what's going on around us in our lives, and how do we sort of make some sense of it so that then it's we can put it down essentially. Then we move to the top right quadrant, which is high exertion and high stimulation, and this is really all about creative recharge. So we do actually need some stuff that is about inspiring us, filling our cup, making us feel connected to the world around us. So this could be things like, going for a walk in nature. You might feel really physically tired when you come home, but you feel inspired because you've seen some beautiful views and you've had great conversation. I often, like one of the things I talk about in the book is, for me, this is when I go on a city break, I might come home feeling quite physically tired because I've done loads of steps and I've seen lots of culture and I've taken lots of things in, but I kind of feel like my creative cup has been refilled, and therefore some of the tasks in my business and some of the tasks in my life feel easier because I've got new ideas flowing and I've got new things that I can explore. And then, sorry.
I'm going to stop you. Is that why the minute we go away, which we don't do very often, my brain goes, pa-ching!
Yeah.
There are all the ideas. And I go, no, I just want to sleep. I want to sleep and rest. Is that why that happens?
Yeah, because we kind of need that space to, again, put our ideas in context and take them out of our day-to-day and think about them in the wider world. And, we can, there might be, the other thing that really fits into this box is learning. So people might have a similar experience being part of your program, or if they've learned, been back to university or to college or done anything like that, you feel tired because it's really exhausting taking on lots of new information, and it requires a lot of physical energy, it requires a lot of mental energy, but it also really stimulates ideas and excitement, and it creates joy, which ultimately helps to create more energy.
Okay, good. Let's do that top left corner, which is high energy, high stimulation. Is that right?
Yes, so that's the one we just talked about. Sorry, the creators. The bottom is the high exertion and the low stimulation, and this is our emotional recharge. So this is about physically moving the stress out of our body. And the great thing for you guys as flower farmers is you're naturally doing this day to day anyway. It's it's not a sedentary job. I know from having seen your business up close, but essentially there's a lot of research that shows to complete the stress cycle, our bodies need to move and to feel connected in some way. So when our nervous system is activated, our body can't tell the difference between whether we've just had a tax bill through or whether we're being chased by a lion. It responds in exactly the same way. It creates that same cortisol response, except what would have happened if we were being chased by a lion is we would have run away and then we'd have stopped, and our body would have had a signal that we're now safe. We've now completed the stress cycle. What happens in the modern world is we get an email that feels overwhelming, or we receive a tax bill, or, we put ourselves out of our comfort zone. We activate the stress response, and then we often just say, sat at the desk. And so our body isn't getting the message that we're okay. The threat is over. So we need to physically do something to complete that stress response, and movement is perfect for that. So it doesn't have to be really vigorous movement, but if we can move and we can sort of raise our heart rate a little bit, and then we can allow that heart rate to come back down, what that tells our body and our nervous system is we're now safe. We can also get that from, there's some research that shows if you sort of have a hug with someone, so it could be a child, it could be a partner, but the caveat is you both need to feel equally supported so that you're holding the other person as well as them holding you. We can get it from, some people might have seen like TED Talks and things around shaking. So if you just stand and literally physically shake your arms and then stop, we've sent that signal to our body. But this is really, I've called this quadrant emotional recharge because it's about completing that stress response, and it's about just signaling to our brain we're safe. And again, everyone will have had the experience of having a super stressful day, feeling really activated, getting into bed and trying to sleep, and your brain is like, no way, we're still actively scanning for threats and risks, and that's why you're up at 3 a.m. thinking, well, what if this doesn't work, and what if that happens, and what if that person says no? And we are in that activated sense. So doing something, whether that is, like I say, going for a walk, going for a run, often for your listeners it will be getting out on the farm and moving some things, or planting something, or getting those hands in the earth. That is another thing that can feel really, really grounding. But it's almost signaling to our body, we're okay, we're safe, we're not being attacked by a lion anymore.
Sophie, thank you. That's firstly a really beautiful explanation. And secondly, just add some clarity. So as you've been talking, I have set up my quadrants. I have thought about the things that I do or things that help me that fit into each of those quadrants, to think about what I'm doing during my week. Now, I started the podcast by asking you about productivity and saying, well, isn't it just another stick to beat ourselves with? And I know that busy people, busy mums and busy carers of elderly people and busy business people and busy women just go, well, I've got time to sleep. That happens at the end of my day, and it happens between 10 and 6 or 11 and 5 or whenever it is you fit in your sleep. And this isn't for me to talk about what enough hours of sleep is, because that's different for every person.
Yeah.
But those other three things that you're describing, and you're describing as bringing us energy to help us to have the capacity to do the work that we want to do, and that brings us joy, they feel like extra things to fit into the diary or to fit into an already packed moment. What I love is that you've described journaling that actually you could do for 5 minutes, or you could do for 50 minutes. And you've described creativity, which I think is a bit harder for us to do. Are there any suggestions that you have about what we could do outside? I mean, obviously florists are working with flowers, making beautiful things all the time, but there's still often that fight or flight that you're describing, that kind of stress trigger of they're doing it for a wedding, or they're doing it for a funeral, and the funeral directors are about to come and collect. What are the things that you would suggest that we do in that kind of creative bundle that we could fit into a day, or into 10 minutes regularly, or I'm not wanting to sell it short. I'm not wanting to say we don't need to do this. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be offering time. It's about getting started. And one of the things that I talked about my daughter about with kind of maths homework is, well, once we get started, it's actually not that bad.
Yeah.
Or once we get started, we remember how much joy it brings us and how much better we feel at the end of it. And just a little bit often is enough to get us going. How do we do that?
Yeah. I love that question. And again, that was something that I really wanted to keep driving home throughout this book, is that this isn't another to-do list. This isn't a routine that you sort of beat yourself up about if you can't fit it in. This is about giving people the tools to bring into their own life. Some of the things I would offer up here, I would say I imagine so many of your audience are already doing this, because learning goes into that category, learning something new. And I know as a business owner, not a day goes past where you don't have to learn something new, whether that's like a bit of tech to make the website work, or whether it's I've tried to make this thing happen and it didn't work. And so how can I, find a different solution? So, and being more intentional about that learning and thinking about what do we really want to learn rather than what are we being forced to learn can help. Okay. And that can come from reading a really great book, or like I say, listening to a podcast while you're out on a walk, or something that just gets those ideas sort of flowing. I think the other thing is that often we don't have to think about this as for our business or in our business. It's about part of life. So it might be, like I said, going for a walk in the woods with your kids at the weekend, and just being a little bit more open to, we're already going for that walk. Instead of just seeing it as a means to an end of, I've got a 2-year-old. I know that if I don't get her out for an hour a day, she's like a Labrador and she'll be pinging off the wall. So we go out for our walk every day because it's very much a necessity and an essential. Yeah. But the mindset that we take on that walk can really change how sort of restorative it is for us. So if we are approaching that walk like a child and thinking, can we spot any snowdrops today? Or can we, what's the sky doing? Or how does the wind feel today? And we're a little bit more tuned in to what is going on. That is going to feel much more restorative, because it's giving our brain a place to go to that isn't just the day-to-day work. It isn't just the to-do list. It's giving ourselves that little bit of a break, and it's allowing us to be open to inspiration. I think back to the dreaded lockdown period where we go for that walk every day, and it was very much like, eyes down, must do this because it's the only time I'm allowed out, but it didn't feel that inspiring. Whereas if we can go out and this time of year is a beautiful time of year for it, because it's like nature is literally coming back to life before our eyes, and there is so much metaphor and creativity to be found in that. But sometimes it's just that sense of doing those things that feel approaching them in a slightly different way. And the last thing I would say, the thing that I found really useful with this, is knowing that it's an investment. So I think sometimes we see those things as a draw on our energy of like, I've only got a fixed amount of energy for today. And if I go out for a walk for an hour, or if I go to a museum or an art gallery, or I go and do any of those things, I've spent some of my energy doing it. But knowing that we get a return on that energy. So we might spend the physical hour, but that might 10x the amount of creative energy we've got, which allows us to get through the rest of our to-do list. That kind of almost trusting in that and giving it a go and experimenting with it a few times and collecting some evidence that does actually work can then make it easier to keep prioritizing. So, we're always going to sit and do the thing on the to-do list because, or many of us will, because it feels good to tick it off. Yep. But actually making ourselves take half an hour out to go and watch a YouTube video or a workshop, or to take half an hour out to go to a gallery or a local exhibition, if we can trust that is just as productive for our businesses, it's a little bit easier to make the time for it.
Yeah. And I think what I'm taking from that as well is that specifically that element of it doesn't have to be for our business. So you could be watching a YouTube video on how to fix a tyre for your car, or how to take the panelling out on my new van so I can insulate it or something. But it's a different skill. It's not directly related. But it's still learning, and that learning is still creativity. And so the energy I get from that is still going to give me a boost somewhere to have the energy to do the slightly less interesting, I have to fix the website again type task.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it is just recognising that it does go against what we've been taught about productivity, but that's because we've been taught in a very sort of specific way that time is the constraint, and we just need to get as much out of the time as possible. And no one's ever really told us, like, actually, it's the energy. It's how you can approach things. We all know we have some days where 5 things on the to-do list feels like a breeze and we can get them done within an hour. And we have other days where 5 things on the to-do list feels like an absolute drag because we're burnt out and we're knackered and our brain is pulled in, 15 different directions. It's trying to get more days like that first one. And these are the things that can help us be in that place and sort of prime ourselves for more of those good days.
Thank you. All right, so we're almost at the end of our time, because I know that you are busy for the rest of the day, and also I need to go back to the field because I've got some peonies to get in. So this is actually
so
part
excited.
of my creative moment of my day, which is very exciting because I'm really enjoying this conversation, and also just thinking about how I might do more bread making or learn. I need to do some sewing, but actually learning how to sew and to darn might actually be a new skill. So what I'd like you to share with us is, firstly, where can people find your book?
Yes. So my book is available in all sorts of places. The best place to find the pre-order links is on my website. So if you go to sophiecliff.com/the-hustle-cure, there are all of the links there. So whether you want to go and buy it from Amazon or you prefer to buy it from an independent retailer, there are lots of different places that you can shop for it there. You can also request it at the library or listen to it on audiobook. It's on both Spotify and Audible, if that's your preferred method of consuming books. And I imagine if people are spending lots of time outdoors, that might be the most efficient method.
So I'm going to put links to your website so that that's easily found. Now, I know that you do more than write books.
Yes.
You're incredibly active in the land of working with women in particular. Can you tell me what else you've got coming up this year and how other people might work with you in different ways?
Yeah, so the main couple of ways to work with me are one-to-one coaching, so supporting people if they've got something specific they want to work through, or they recognise that there are lots of blocks to joy, or they're perhaps in that procrastination archetype and they need a little bit of accountability. That's great for that. And, you know, I'm always happy to chat to people about what that can look like. I have a monthly membership called the Choose Joy Club, and that comprises a monthly workshop taught by me, which is very much like we've been talking about today, rooted in positive psychology and coaching, but giving people the practical tools. We also have group coaching sessions in there, book recommendations, journaling prompts, that kind of thing. And then the other thing that I would always encourage people to just check out, I try to share as much free content as possible because, like I say, one of the things that I am really passionate about is democratizing this information and getting it out of, out of academia and into people's hands. So I have a podcast where I share weekly episodes called Practical Positivity, and I share lots on Instagram and on my newsletter as well. So I'm on Instagram at Sophie Cliff, and we'll always just try to share reminders or invitations around some of this stuff. It's again not a how-to or follow these 5 steps and you'll be forever happy. It's more a reminder to look for the good things in life.
Thank you so much for joining me this morning, Sophie. I have loved talking to you, and I've actually kind of cut out some questions with the intention of trying to keep this down to a listenable length. I'm really grateful for your time, and I hope that our listeners enjoy listening to you as well, and finding out more about that kind of relationship between rest and productivity. As is usually the way, I need to share that we will be back next week on Thursday with another episode of MULCH. We'll be talking about a topic that is relevant to the practice of flower farming. And until then, I'm really grateful for you listening. Feedback is always, always, always welcome. So please do share the podcast in your stories. Please do leave a comment and a rating below. And please do head to Sophie's website and buy her book. I have loved it, and it's really made a difference to how I think and how I work. I'll be back next week. Rebecca.